Awesome, guys. So we're just going to continue where we left off. And I mean, let me just give you guys a little bit of a summary of where we were. We basically created this stuff. So we created the person class, we used inheritance to create a driver class, a passenger class, and then we created a vehicle interface, but we did this slightly differently. We created a car object, right, that implements the vehicle interface. So in future, if we like Uber decides to do some supply management, and like, you know, you want suppliers to have trucks go to all these suppliers and deliver the material to like Mr. Price and stuff, then we could have a trucks would implement the vehicles interface, and trucks would have, like, you know, maybe its own subclasses. But right now we're just using the class. We didn't create the subclass XL and X. We're just sticking with the car object for the sake of simplicity. But you know, as you build larger systems, it just makes sense to create a subclass for XL and X. Um, and we created our test Uber app, so we call it Uber app. We also need to work on this, and then we need to work on our Uber ride, and then we need to do a payments class, and we need to also do our database stuff. So we have quite a bit of stuff left to do. But before I continue, I just want to touch on something that Sarah pointed out, which was basically the toString method, right? So as you guys can see over here, whenever I'm printing the object, I'm not doing .toString. That's because implicitly Java knows that this class has a toString method. So for example, if I go to person already knows that there's a toString method, right? And we know that person is our superclass, and driver inherits from person and passenger inherits from person. So now if we go to our subclass, which is, let's say driver. So driver extends person. We know that driver inherits the properties and attributes from person. And we also override the toString method here. But then how the hell are we able to also access the toString method in the superclass? Like, how the hell is this working, right? This is working because that's the power of inheritance in object-oriented programming. With inheritance, we're able to actually access the toString method of the superclass with the super variable, with the super keyword. So also in our constructor, using the super keyword, we were able to initialize the superclass over there. So that's the power of inheritance. Like, you wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't do extends. Like, if I remove extends over here and I make this, it's going to throw me errors. It's not going to recognize what super is. See, that's the first error that comes. Like, what is super? So that's why that's the power of inheritance. When we do extends person, we're able to initialize the super constructor, and then we're able to access the toString method using the super variable. And then we can append whatever we want to add to it. So that's the cool thing about the super stuff. Now let's actually move on and start working on the remaining parts of our application. Okay, so let's start off with creating. Guys, if you have any questions and stuff, please just unmute, because I won't be able to see the chat. Now the next thing let's actually start over here. Let's take in that start point and end point. And once we take in the start point and end point, we will somehow calculate the distance in our Uber ride class, right? So let's actually start. Yeah?
Hello, Akil. Before you continue, I just want to check, like, is anyone else who wants to join? Because there's 16 participants, so mine is you and me. That's like 14 people. It's a bit off.
It's 18 people. Oh yeah, there's a few people waiting. So there we go.
Is everybody in?
Also, I just want to emphasize on one thing before we continue. Like, a lot of the developers nowadays, like, although they have great like UI skills, like using like prototyping software, like you know, Figma or InVision, right? Using all these prototypes, like, that's a great skill to have. It's not easy, but if you want to have like a skill that's going to pay you a lot, I think a combination of that with knowing a front-end framework will really make you a lot of money in future. And if you enjoy it, it's even better. So if you're able to, if you have a good knack for like good UI and good screens and building that with a InVision prototype or a prototyping tool, and you're able to actually translate that into React code yourself, that's going to That's a killer combination skill to have. But if you want to be good in React, you need to have strong programming fundamentals, which is why like we have to go through this admin stuff. So I really encourage you guys to just keep pushing through the Java. Java is also really cool, but once you move on to web development, I promise you guys will love it. All of you will definitely love that stuff. Asif, dude, I'm just gonna continue.
Yeah, I think. Let me see if I've joined. Have I joined the live share? Am I there? Yeah. Anybody who wants to join the live share, can just put the group the.
I didn't end it. It's the same link. It's already on the group.
All right.
Great.
Okay, let's continue.
Let's continue, dude. So basically, now what we'll do is we'll take an input. So I'm gonna just comment this stuff out. We know that this stuff works. What I'll do is the first thing we want to do is maybe let's create a passenger first, right? So let's have a passenger. And once we have the passenger, we'll take in the input. So we have to use the scanner class. System.in, right? And with that, I'll be able to get input, but then I need to import java.util.scanner. But I think what I'll do is I'll just import .star. If I do java.util.import.star, I'll just import all the different modules there. And then I'm just going to do string. And what should we call this? Start point, right? The start point. And the start point will be sc.nextLine. So just to explain what's happening here, using the scanner object, right? And setting the system in over here, we're just allowing a user to enter input, right? And when we do sc.nextLine, it stores the input into our start point variable. So it'll be something like
that. Okay, hold on. I don't think I can edit the file. Huh? Like I don't think it's not refreshing on my side.
Can you try again?
Like I am writing some gibberish. Can you see it on the screen?
No.
On your Uber app.java?
Are you typing in Uber app.java?
Yeah.
Dude, I see you and you're right here. You're in passenger.java, dude.
I'm on Uber app.java right now. I think I'm gonna close the session and join again.
Yeah, just join again. Great. So what I'll do now is I'm just going to say, please enter your current starting location, right? So that's going to be the starting location. And then let's actually test if this works. And I'm just going to run it over here. Yeah, so it says, I'm just going to remove that print. So it says, please enter your starting location, and then I'll just say UCT, right? And then let me just system.out.
All right, I'm in a kill.
Awesome, it's working.
Yeah.
I'm just testing if we're able to take in input. People are still coming in. Great. So enter current location, I'm going to say UCT. So it says starting point is UCT. Great. So that works. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to take the endpoint, right? So I am going to call this endpoint rather. And then please enter your final destination location, right? And that will be my endpoint. And then that's going to be my starting point. That is going to be my endpoint. And I'm just going to do I'm just going to make that. Let's see what happens. So starting location is UCT, ending location is going to be, let's say, Canal Walk. And it says, gives me my starting point and it gives me my end point, but I'm just printing my end point there. And I'll just do this. I can just do print line. So we're just doing a whole bunch of testing over here to see if we're actually able to grab the current location and the final location correctly. And if we're able to do that, so we see starting point UCT, endpoint Canal Walk. So that looks fine. Looks like we're able to grab our starting point and our ending point. And then what was the other thing we had to take, guys? We had to also take the type of vehicle that we want to go with. So I'll also just add that there. Print line, please enter vehicle of your choice. Either XL or X. And I'm just going to call this vehicle type. And I'll also just do something similar here. I'll take the vehicle type just to see if we're able to actually grab the right data. I'll make that again, run that again, and enter my current starting location is UCT, ending location is Canal Walk, and vehicle of my choice has to be X. Right, vehicle type is X. So look, as you can see, we're able to grab the data as we want. And now the next part becomes that we need to work on is using the data we get, we need to be able to create that Uber ride. So I think we can actually move on and talk about how our Uber ride class is going to work. And in our Uber ride class, we need to create all these methods. But actually before that, I think we should go ahead and create an abstract class. So do any of you remember how to go about creating an abstract class? So always, guys, there's no harm in Googling and referencing before working. And how I see it, we have to just define a class using the abstract keyword, and we have to basically extend, and it will be able to access that class, right? So we can also initialize variables inside the abstract class and probably access them in our inherited class, right? So let us actually create our abstract class called ride that will have a whole bunch of variables and functions that we need to override. Okay, so let us go ahead and create our ride.java, and this is going to be our abstract class. And the purpose of doing this abstract class is to allow to create Uber ride or Taxify ride. Actually, it's called Bolt, Bolt ride and whatnot, right? And to define that, we have to do public abstract class, and we would call this ride. And initially, we can initialize the class with variables and methods that can be overridden, right? I'm not sure if that's how I spell it, but I'm just going to go with it. And let's see, in our class, the variables that we need to have are starting point, ending point, rate, time, driver, passenger. So I think for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to create the variables string starting point, string ending point, and methods that can be overridden will be public. Let's see, calculate distance should return double, right? Public double, calculate distance. And this is going to actually be just the definition like that, right? So to calculate the distance, we need the start point and the end point. And I have to also specify the type here. when we're creating that. And I think that's it, right? To calculate the distance, we just need the start point and end point. And let's see what are the methods we would need. We would need to assign driver. So public double assign. Okay, not double, but I think this could just be, this has to be driver type, huh? Asif, are you there? Assign driver. Okay. And let's see what else is there. There has to be calculate cost. So public, I'm also going to make calculate cost a double, calculate cost. So we're just creating an abstract class right now. And then finally, we just need to complete payment. And complete payment can be void, I think. Right? Great. So this is basically our abstract class, which is our ride. And let me see if it's defined correctly. So I think we actually need to specify using the keyword abstract inside the abstract class. And that is something that hasn't been done. Okay. I'm just going to.
Yo, this is a question. Do we need abstract function for abstract class?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean abstract function?
Isn't there one abstract function always in abstract class that you have to override at least one abstract function?
Yeah, these are the abstract functions that we're creating right now, right? And then we'll override these methods.
So guys, abstract functions basically don't have any like it's similar to interfaces, right? Like this is how interfaces is very similar to interfaces. So abstraction basically is a concept in all object-oriented programming, and you can achieve by using an interface or abstract class. There are two ways of achieving the same purpose, right?
I'm just going to add the ride abstract class into our makefile real quick. Great. Cool, no errors. Okay, that's good news. Now we've created our ride abstract class, and with this, we can create something that will force us to override these methods, right? So let us go ahead and create our uberride.java. Okay, public class uberride. And inside this class, we are basically going to override, not override, but we have to extend our ride class.
Let me make the constructor then.
Cool, go for it. Let me just make that.
Setters and getters.
Let me just add this to the makefile.
Oh.
Let me just duplicate this. Great. Awesome. So uberride.
What are variables? I should check what those are. So you have to
Yeah. So as you can see, we're getting an error because we haven't overridden the methods yet, because we've extended ride, and ride is actually an abstract class. So the error, to read the error, it says uberride is not abstract, and does not override abstract method complete payment in ride. So our next plan of action should be to override those methods. So I'm just going to collapse this. And let's override these methods. So we know that to calculate distance, we need the starting point and the end point, right? And we'll be getting the starting point Okay, I mean, just before we actually do the implementation, let's just
Akhil,
create some.
can you see my changes?
Yeah, I can see your changes.
But I can't see
You created
yours.
the instance variables, right?
I'm creating more of them, but I can't see your changes.
Okay, here I'm just gonna make this void for now. Or yeah, guys, I'm just gonna make our assign driver class, our assign driver method void. So void is basically there's no return type. It's not gonna return anything. And I'll just make that void here, and it's not gonna return anything. Calculate cost will return some sort of double. And complete payment is also a void method, right? And now if I make this, let's see what happens. Oh, in our ride class, there's some random text here. So it says that okay, I'm not sure what this error is. The error says javac directory not found bin l. Oh my gosh. Okay, something went wrong in our makefile. Guys, please don't make changes to the files. So we're getting errors, and the errors are it says that the abstract methods cannot have a body.
So Akhil, I don't think you have to say abstract now. Remove abstract.
Oh yeah.
From your override.
Good catch, man.
Yeah.
And we don't have to say
so
abstract anymore because this is not an abstract class anymore.
So abstract functions only come in abstract classes, right? You only write abstract functions in abstract classes, and abstract functions don't have methods. Sorry, don't have a body, right? And then when you override these, right, what you want to do is you want to actually you want to define like a normal function, but the name should be the same from the abstract class, all right?
Great. So now I think let's talk about the next steps, right? When we initialize our object in Uber app, right, we need to create this Uber ride object. And the first thing we want to do is we want to calculate the distance, right? Now to calculate the distance, we need to take that starting point and the ending point, right? And we need to run it through some sort of API or some sort of function that will give us the distance, right? So now, like basically, in order to do this, we could use a tool like geolocation. Like we could use Google Maps for that. Like you know how in Google Maps you can put the starting point and the ending point, and it'll give you like the distance, and it'll give you a whole bunch of data. Similarly, we can do something similar there, where we're able to calculate the distance somehow, right? So I think the next point of action is to basically create that link, some sort of link to access that that data. So now we'll need to do some sort of research, right? Asif, can I move away from the editor, or?
I'm just putting instance variables, right? I think they know how to do that already.
Okay,
so
cool. So I'm just gonna continue. So what we're doing, guys, is we need some sort of way to access, to play around with this data, so that we're able to access this distance. Like, we'll be able to take a starting point and an ending point, and then we'll be able to return distance. So I think a cool Google search would be, let's see, calculating
Akhil, before that, do you wanna explain what an API is?
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Let's see.
Yeah.
So API is a set of routines, protocols, and tools for building software applications. Basically, an API specifies how software components should interact. So let us see if there's some nice images to explain what API is. There we go. I think that's a good one. This is a great one. So basically, guys, this is a good explanation of what an API is, right? So we always have a browser or a web app in our computer, right? And then using the internet, we're able to make a request. So when I say request, I mean like even if you want to go on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, right? You're using the internet for that. And when you type google.com, for example, right, you're accessing Google's web server, right? And with that web server, Google can access its database. And that database would be like all the different like Gmail accounts that are stored in Google. That database would hold all that data. And if we make a request using the internet to access that functionality that's in our web server, we would need something called an API, an application programming interface. There's actually a nice analogy for this. The analogy is basically using like a hotel analogy. Is it hotel or waiter? I think it's waiter analogy. There's also some nice videos you can find on this. So let's see this. The ABCs of APIs. What are APIs and what's the biggest deal about them? We'll break it down for you. Okay, I think that's some advertisement. Yeah, there we go. This is a brilliant example. So look, basically our app or client would be something like our website, right? And that is, in this example, the menu is basically the customer, right? So we would open our menu and we'd say, okay, fine, I want to order this ice cream from this menu, right? And in order to do that, the waiter serves as the API. So in this case, the waiter will be the API. And then the waiter is going to go to the kitchen, and the kitchen would basically be the database or the server, right? You'll go to the server and it will say, this customer wants ice cream. So that's the request that's made, right? And then the server is going to maybe like use its database. Database is nothing but something to just store data, right? Server is basically where we're running all the functions, like all these Java functions that we're running would be in some server that will access a database, right? So basically the server is going to,
hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Akhil said server, right? Right now, when you're writing your function, that's even a server. It's called a local server, right? So you're running it locally in your computer. So your computer is some form of server as well, where it's just doing all the processing. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a big ass server out there by Amazon or Google or somebody where we will upload our code to, and they will do our processing for us. Okay. So basically, that's going to be like our way. Our main computations will happen once we build big apps.
Exactly, right? So we'll actually go through servers. We'll be using Node.js to build our server once we go to the web development section. Sorry guys, just one sec. So yeah, basically over here in this example, the kitchen is going to serve as our server, and in our server we have received a request for ice cream, right? So using that ice cream, using that information, we'll make the ice cream in the kitchen. And then using the waiter, which is our API, we'll send a response back to the customer. And that customer is going to get the ice cream that they ordered. That is what the API does. So simply put, the API is just a way to take requests from a client, take it to the server, and then take a response and give it back to the client. So a real example for that will be something like using Instagram. When we open our Instagram app through our phone acts as the client, right? And then the moment we want to load some posts from people, right? I mean, that's what initially happens. An API call is made by that app, right? And that API call is made to the API, right? And the API fetches the data, fetches the posts, and then we can see the posts on our screen as a response. So that's the response that's sent. So that's basically how the API works. Does this make sense, guys? Can you drop a message on the chat if it does? So Kamo, I'm just seeing your message now. It says, I feel much better with regards to the work. It breaks it down in a way that we possibly all think. And the best part is that with the platform for suggestions, it allows us to get more insight on how to possibly approach our work. Thanks, Kamo. That's great feedback. Cool, guys. If the API stuff doesn't make sense, don't worry. Like as we do this example, it will definitely come through together. All right. Cool. So basically, there are many APIs that exist out there. Like there's a Twitter API to access Twitter data. There's like a Google API to access Google data. So what we'll be using now is something called a geolocation API, right? So we want to calculate the distance between two locations using Google API, right? I'm just going to say Google API. So it says you with maps JavaScript API, right? But I'm just going to say Java here. And we will use something called a distance matrix. So it calculates the travel distance and time between a number of points using the, yeah. So I guess let's check this out, okay? So basically this introduction, it says that the distance matrix API is a service that provides travel distance and time for a matrix of origins and destinations. The API returns information based on the recommended route between start and endpoints as calculated by Google Maps API and consists of rows containing duration and distance values for each pair. Great. So I think anytime like you read any documentation, so what we're looking at right now is actually Google documentation, and specifically for developers, you can see that a lot of the work that you do as a developer, even if you look at what we've done today, it's been very much less coding and more research and more planning. And that's how it works. Like that's the life of a programmer. Like the better you plan, the less stressful you're gonna get writing code. So before you begin, this document is intended for developers who wish to compute travel distance. And before you start developing, you need to have an API key, and there needs to be billing on your project. All right. So don't worry, guys. Like to use the Google API, we actually don't have to pay for anything. It's free. And basically, what we have to do is we'll be using this API over here. Okay. So what this does is it's just a link. Any API is normally a link, right? And with this link, it's just going to return some sort of data, right? So you can see that this link over here, this long link over here, it has these two things, the output format and the parameters, right? So output format can either be JSON or XML. Before I continue, let me explain what JSON is, right? Because if you want to do APIs, you also need to understand what JSON is, right? So let's see. Let's actually see the JSON website. W3 Schools is also a great resource to understand concepts. So you can see that JSON, the full form is JavaScript Object Notation, right? It's just a method of exchanging data. So when exchanging data between browser and server, the data can only be text, right? JSON is text, and we convert any JavaScript object into JSON and send JSON to the server. We can convert any JSON received from the server into JavaScript objects. So just to explain this better, right? Whenever we're dealing with an API, right, we're making some sort of request and we're receiving some sort of response. When we make the request, right, we need to send the data in a manner that the server will understand and the waiter will understand. So like in the normal world, we'll just use English to explain English or whatever language, depending on where you are, to make sure that the waiter understands and the chef understands in the kitchen, right? Now, in using our API, right, we need to use something called JSON. JSON would be that language that will be understood by the waiter and the kitchen, right? So basically our JSON will be the medium through which we exchange data. So we'll send, anytime we send data, we'll send data using JSON, right? If like you need to send some sort of data to the server, we'll send using JSON. And if you want to receive data from the server, we'll always receive it in JSON. And that's how all APIs work. That's how this Google API also works. It uses JSON or a different form called XML. We are not going to go through XML because JSON is more popular. Like anytime you work with APIs, especially if you do web development, you'll see that JSON is nothing but just a JavaScript object. So it's really, really easy to use JSON. But what you need to know is that this is the language that's used to communicate between clients and servers. Clients would be like the web app or the mobile app, and then server would be like, like a Google server or Amazon server. All right.
So sorry guys, if we continue and we go into like building the API and doing the API call, does everyone understand what JSON is? Please type a yes if you do.
Awesome, guys. Guys, if it's not clear, please let us know. Great. Cool. Awesome. So basically, guys, this is a nice example of an API, right? We would make a request like this. And then JSON, let me show you guys what JSON looks like. JSON looks like, let's see. This is what JSON looks like. It's just a big object like this that has a whole bunch of properties inside it. So this might actually remind you of Python. This is like a Python dictionary, right? A Python dictionary has key and value pairs. And we'll also do something in Java coming in the, like I think next week. It's something called hash sets. It's a similar concept. It's key value pairs. That is what JSON is, guys. We have a key and then we have a value. So we have a key over here called status, and the value for it is okay. And the cool thing with JSON is we can store objects. We can store like arrays inside as a value. We can also do that in Python, right, Asif?
Yeah, you can. You can.
So you can see that this is what we want. So inside this rows over here, we have this big array, right? And inside that array, we have another object. And inside that object, we have another key. It's called elements, right? And this elements basically has another array. And inside that array, we have a whole bunch of elements, right? So you can see that the first thing is it gives us the distance. It gives us the duration. So it'll take 3 hours and 22 minutes to get from this origin address to this destination address. So origin is basically the starting point. Destination is the ending point, right? And you can see that we also get the distance as a text. And this is exactly what we want, guys. We want this distance. This is what we're looking for. And then we also get, I think this is status, okay, with traffic, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually not sure what this second part of the object means.
I think it's because.
Oh, there's two origins. There's two origins. There's two origins and two destinations. That's why. So like the one place, once this start to this end, and this start to this end, and this start to this end, and this start to this end, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's definitely that. Cool. So in our case, it's very simple. We don't need 4 addresses. We just need one origin address and one destination address, right? So let's actually go back. So this is what an object looks like, guys. It's as simple as that. Right? And basically, this is what XML looks like. This is not something we'll be working with, but you can also use this. I've never played around with XML. I remember doing it a bit at university, but I ended up using JSON because it's so much more easier. Like if we want to access objects and stuff, it's super, super simple. Let me actually show you guys how JSON would work, right? So we can actually just use the console for that. So let me create an object for you guys, okay? So var demo object, and I'm just going to put name, kill, and it's actually separated by commas, surname, Bodu, right? And I'm just going to leave it at that. So that's my demo object, okay? Now if I do demo object dot name, I can access my name. And then if I do dot name is actually equal to a new object. So I can put a sub object within that, right? And maybe inside the sub object, I can put my age, right? So now if I do demo object, you'll see that demo object actually has name, which has an object within it, right? This is what JSON is, guys. Like you can see that it's getting recognized by the console over here. Like if we want to access the age now, we have to do demo object dot name dot age, and you'll see we get 22. Now similarly, if I just change my demo object dot surname to an array, I can just change it to an array like that.
But guys, this is all JavaScript, right? It's not Java. It's doing on the browser.
Now, but
you don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. But this is just to show that you can actually access how we would go about accessing the data that we would receive usually, right? We would have to do demo object. So now if you want to access the surname, we have to do surname, and we get this array like this. And if you want to access something in the array, we would just put like the index of it, and then we get access to it like that. So it's like really, really simple. Like it's literally like, you know, just knowing how to nest into it, and using the dot, we'll be able to go within it and find exactly what we're looking for. So now if we want to access our distance over here, right, which is this, we would basically do something like, first we have to do the object. So we'll like this entire object, we can call it response. Like that entire object, if we call it response, within that object, we need to do response. I'm just going to type here response.rows. Once we do response.rows, we have access to this array, right? Once we have, and this array only has one element. You can see that this entire thing is just stored in rows. So if I want to access that object, I'd have to just access that first element like that. And then if I do dot elements, I'll be able to access the elements array. And then you can see the elements is again an array, right? It's this array here. So what I want to do again is to access an array, we have to use indexing. So I'll use the 0 position. So to get that first position, right? And that first position is going to be this object, right? And now within that object, I just want to access the distance. So what I'll do is I'll do dot distance, right? And then once I access the distance, I just want to access the text. Now this is no longer in an array, it's just like that directly. So we can just do dot text. And that's how we would be able to access our text. All right. So I hope that makes sense. And this is the kind of object that we'll be receiving. And this is how we would have to access that text, right?
So it makes sense. Like type a yes if it does. And if it doesn't, I think we go through it again.
Yeah. What I'll do is I'll just add it here as a comment so that it's just there for your reference. But remember, guys, accessing this data over here is using JSON. Like this is how we would access the data using JSON, right? But as we move from language to language, like the nesting is the same. Like if you understand the nesting, you'll be able to understand how to get to the data. So this is how we would generally do it, but in Java, it might be slightly different, and we'll figure that out together. All right. So how's the chat coming along, Asif?
I think only 3 people have said yes. I'm waiting for everyone else. Sanya, Sarah. Sarah wants to go through it again.
Sure. So Sarah, should I go through like how to retrieve the data, or should I go through like what an API is and what JSON is? I think what JSON is, right?
Just how to retrieve the data.
Okay, great. So basically, using JSON, we would have to retrieve the data, right? And the data normally will come in an object like this, right? As a JSON object. This is called a JSON object. So if we want to access the data in this JSON object, right, we have to do some sort of nesting to access the data, right? So basically, how it would work is that it's like a key value pair. Like this object, if we call this object a response, so response is equal to this object, right? Let me create a new file in here. I'm just gonna say that this is the JSON object, right?
Akhil, why don't you just create a JavaScript file and then just just make it a J. Okay, I can do that.
Right. So this is the JSON file. So you can see that VS Code has done some formatting for me. So you can see that this is what this file looks like, right? So you'll see that this is just, it has to be like something like this, right? This is what we're looking at. So basically our response is going to be this object like this, right?
Akhil,
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is to explain this better. How about you just create a JavaScript file, right? And then store it in a variable and then step by step access the variable.
Okay, I think that's a great idea, dude. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. But like guys, just a disclaimer, this is actually using Java, JavaScript, right? So that would be like, yes, this would actually be using JavaScript, but you must know that it's in Java, it'll be slightly different, right? So I'm just going to create a const. So like, you know, in Java, in JavaScript, this is how we define variables. So don't worry too much about that now. I'm just going to call it response, right? So this will be our response object. And if I want to access this, I would actually need to create an HTML file, Asif, to access this.
You can console.log it.
No, but how will I run the JavaScript file? See my chat? No problem. I can create, let me just create a new folder. I'll call this HTML. Oh, not HTML. Let me just say JSON demo, right? So guys, it's funny how we're just doing some random HTML right now. Oh, rename that. Don't worry too much about the HTML and all this stuff, guys. We'll go into proper detail later on. Is there a way I can get HTML template? Awesome, great. So this is what an HTML5 file would look like. And then I think if we want to access the JavaScript, we would have to do something like this. And then source is going to be /demo.js. And then if I come over here and just console.log JSON demo. So in Java, guys, in JavaScript, we like putting a semicolon is optional. So you won't get any errors if you forget to do that. So I'm just going to check our index.html. And I'm just going to access the console again. And if I access the console, I should see my JSON demo. So that means like my file is working. And now inside this file, if I do response dot, so what I'll do is below over here, I'm just going to console. So console.log is the same as system.out.println in JavaScript. And I'm just going to do console.log response.status, right? And let's see what comes. So you can see the status comes as okay, which is correct, right? We know that the status is okay. Now, if I want to access rows, right, what I'll do is I'll do response.rows, right? And if I refresh, you'll see that I get an array. And this array has 2 elements, which are objects, right? And these, the first element basically has an array called elements, right? So this is something that might look slightly confusing now, guys, but I think with time, when you start web development, it'll make so much more sense. So basically, this is an array that has 2 elements. And this, you can see that each element is a JavaScript object, right? So if I look at the first element, right, and I do elements, you can see that that elements has an array over here of 2 elements over here. So basically, let us break this down, right? So inside our rows, we have a big array, okay? And you can see the array ends over here. Then inside that array, we have 2 elements, this first element and the second element. So now if I just want to access the first element, right, what I'll do is I'll just say 0 because I want to access only the first element, right? So if I do that and I run this, you'll see that I have access to the elements. And now inside the elements, I only want to access the, which one was it? I think I just want to access the first one inside elements, right? Because I just want to get one origin, right? So what I'll do is inside elements, there's also another array, okay? So inside rows over here, inside, like I'm getting this object over here, elements. And if I want to access this array, I need to do dot elements so that I can access that array, right? So if I do dot elements, let's see what we get, right? So we're just testing as we go, guys, testing as we go. And you can see we got an array that has 2 elements. So inside our elements, we have access inside our elements now. And if I just want to access the duration, the distance. I just want to access the distance of the first element, right? So what I'll do is I'll check the first element and I'll just get the distance. And if I refresh, you can see that I have access to this inside object, right? That has text and value. And if I do .text and refresh, bam, we have our distance. So this is what we're doing, guys. Like, we're just trying to access this distance over here. And to do that, we need to go through this sort of process. So anytime you're working with an API, you just need to know how to use JSON because JSON is the language that APIs understand. And you just need to know how to access that data. So this is once we've made the API call, right? Once we've made the API request and we've received the response will come in a format like this. And once we've received that response, we can access the data we want like that, right? Guys, did that make sense? Please type a yes in the chat if it did and no if it didn't. Great.
Are we getting yeses?
Yeah, mostly yeses.
Okay.
Great stuff, guys. Great, awesome. So now we understand how to receive the data, right? And we know how to access our kilometers value. Like we know how to do that. But like basically just to explain, let me just explain the process over here again, right? Basically the first step is to make a request using an API. The second step is to get the data. right? And access it, access the response you are looking for. So to do the API, it's just this two-step process. And what we have understood now is how we would get the data, right? How we would get the data using JavaScript over here and using a JSON object. But now we need to work around how would we make a request? Like how would we make a request to actually actually access that data, right? And now this is where it becomes a bit tricky because it varies from language to language. How we'd make a request varies from language to language, right? Guys, what is happening? Great. How is this happening, guys? Asif, can you see what's happening?
Yeah, I can. Like someone's playing around with the stuff.
Guys, please don't do this. Awesome. Cool. So now we can move on to the next part where we need to talk about how we would make the API request, right? So like we were looking at this API, looking at this documentation over here of how we would make the API call, right? And we saw that to make the API call, we need to use this link over here. And this link has different parameters. So it has an output format and it has parameters, right? And the required parameters are basically origins. So origins is the starting point to calculate distance and time. And then destinations is the endpoint, right? And the key is basically your API key. So we will need to create our own API key if we want to actually do this, right? And this is a great example of how they're doing an API call using coordinates. And I think rather than coordinates, let's just use the one that has text in it. So remember, guys, because we're dealing with Google Maps, we can actually use coordinates like the X and Y coordinates to actually access locations. But I think we can just use something simple like this, access the actual location like that. Okay, and if we put this vertical line over here, it just allows us to add multiple parameters. How do I know that? I read that over here in the documentation. So you can supply one or more locations separated by a pipe character like that, right? Awesome. So like, this is great. Like we are understanding how we would do this, but we need to figure out how we would insert our API key over here. Like, how would we create our own API key? Now, let us do that. Let us actually create our own API key. I recommend that you guys follow along for this. And let's see what the steps are. So let us see, learn how to get a key. So guys, everything is here. And it's like, as a developer, you just need to have the patience to research and figure out how to do it, right? So look, this is great. We have the actual steps over here. So we need to visit the Google Cloud Platform console and then click the project dropdown and select or create the project for which you want to add an API key. And then click the menu button and select APIs and services. So I mean, first let's just enter over here. And I think we need to create a project. How would we create the project? So I'm just gonna create a new project. So guys, just to explain what I just did you guys catch that, what I just did right now? Please type a yes in the chat if you did. Otherwise, I will just continue from here. Okay, great. So I'm just creating a new project now. And I'm just gonna call this project, let's see, Uber clone, right? Uber clone OOP Java. And no organization, and I'm just gonna create. Make sure that all the fields are correct to continue. So what's the issue? It says The name has invalid characters. Enter letters, number, single quotes. So I'm just going to say uber clone -op -java. Create. And great, I have completed the first step of creating a project. I hope it works. It's taking a moment. So looks like our uber clone OOP was created. And like we also have a thing to learn over here. I just want to view my project. Great. And now our project we get this dashboard over here. So I mean, this dashboard has a lot going on. Like I haven't really played around with Google Cloud, but what I do know is I just want to deal with APIs right now, right? So I'm just going to go to APIs overview. And I want to enable an API. So let's see. Yeah, so see guys, somehow we ended up in API and services. Oh, and that is how we would access our API key, right? But I think before we do that, we need to actually enable Google Maps, right? So I mean, we would have to use this API over here, this distance matrix. So what I'll do is I'll type distance matrix over here. So that, yeah, there we go. That's the distance matrix API. And I want to enable this. So now if I enable it, it will be linked to my key, right? So my key will know that I have this distance matrix API enabled, because you have to enable it. If you don't enable it, it's not going to work. So it might take a while to enable. And once it's enabled, we can go to credentials. So I'm just following the instructions from here. Like if you go to credentials, you can create credentials and then you'll get an API key created. So I need to create an API key now. So this is we're doing all this because we saw that down here, we were required to create, and we're required to add our API key here. So let us see. So this is something that I've already worked on before. Like this is my old API key. Let's see. What is the instructions? Credentials page, click create credentials. So I think I don't have the option to create credentials because I've already created credentials. So I mean, if one of you are actually doing this process right now, do you see an option to create credentials? Please type a yes in the chat if you do. So I see a few yeses. Awesome, great. So I think once you create a credential, right, it will allow you to use this API key. Let me see. Let me just delete this and actually create a new one. Let's see what happens. So I've deleted my API key. And I don't see an option to create. Let me just refresh that. Awesome. So actually don't see an option to create an API. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Create credentials. So I'm just going to create an API key. And that will be my API key. I'm fine with that. And I've copied my API key now. And I'm going to go back to the documentation. And I'm just going to click over here. Okay, I don't know. Oh, this actually links to my Firebase. Okay, I'm just going to ignore this. What I'll do is I'll use something called Postman. So with Postman, you can do you can create requests. Let me just open a new tab, and you can paste the thing over here. So you can paste the API that API request. This is what this is called as an API request. And guys, just download the tool Postman. If you type it on Google, you'll get it. And basically, if I say UCT, and it's in South Africa, and I just want to remove this piping, I don't need that. And destinations, I'm just going to make this Canal Walk Shopping Center, SA. And I'm just going to remove the piping because I don't want multiple variables, multiple parameters. And then departure time is now, and I have to add my API key over here. So to access my API key, I just have to go to my console, access my API key, and I'm just going to replace it over there. And I just pasted it there right now. And if I send, let's see what we get. You can see that we actually get an object. So using our API key, we were able to get an object. And we can see that from Canal Walk, from Rondebosch to Canal Walk is about 10.6 kilometers. And it takes about 9 minutes. And duration in traffic will also take 9 minutes. Like the current, it's giving us the current time it would take. So it looks like there's not much traffic right now. So that's it, guys. This is the value we want in our Java application. And we now know that we were able to make the request, right? So using Postman, you don't have to know any like specific coding language or anything. You can just know that this is the API request link. It's a GET request. So there's different types of requests you can see. The only things you need to know about is GET, POST, PUT, like even GET and POST. If you know GET and POST, it's sufficient. But the 4 main things is GET, POST, PUT, and delete, and even patch. So I don't think people use PUT anymore. It's just GET, POST, patch, and delete. Those are the 4 things you need to know. So with GET, it gets data. With POST, it creates new data. With patch, it edits data. And with delete, it deletes the data from, like if we're making an API request to delete data from a database or add data from a database. Right now, we're just doing a GET request to get data from using Google Maps API. So that's why we're using GET over here. All right, awesome. So now we just need some sort of way to implement this in our Java application. Like now we created our API key with our Google account, and we know that we just have to pass in like this string over here. We just need to somehow pass in this UCT and Canal Walk Shopping Center. And if we do that, our app is going to work. Like we'll be able to calculate the distance. So now we just need to create this in Java. But before we do that, do you guys have any questions with what we've done so far? Asif, do you have anything to add maybe?
No, I think this is fine. I just want to know if anyone has questions.
Yeah. Any questions, guys? Please drop in the chat. Yes, if it makes sense. No, if it doesn't make sense. So guys, what we're doing right now is very practical work. This is the stuff that you're going to have to do when you're in industry. Yeah, Lonwabo, like that's what we're going to do next. We're going to actually make the request from Java. So,
and we don't know how to do it, so we're going to figure it out together.
Yeah, we've only worked with JavaScript and Node.js, like making API requests. Like Asif is the guy who's actually created many APIs. I'm more of a front-end React guy. And we always, like Asif creates the APIs and he gives me these APIs, and I use Postman like this to test the API if it works. And then I just copy paste that into my app. So anytime you're working with APIs, you should always use Postman to test if the API works. And then once that API works, you can implement it in your app. So now we'll be implementing this in our Java app, since I don't see anyone has any questions. The whole session is recorded, guys. We'll put the videos on YouTube so you can check it out later. But let's actually see. So I'm just gonna close this stuff. I don't need any of this stuff anymore. I think I'll just keep that open. And now I'll just search over here, how to make API call Java. So guys, I just picked the first link that came up, and I'm just checking how would we actually create an API call, make an API request with Java. No.
Okay, you know, there's actually a library called Swing. Not Swing, sorry, I think it's Spring.
Spring
is in Java, I think. Yeah. But otherwise, just get done with the D's one. Yeah, I think this one is something.
So check this out. I've checked this out before. This is cool. So if we check out this URL over here and put that in our Postman, I'm just going to create a new tab. You can see that we get this data. Like this is some random API request that gets some posts. So I think this is how like Instagram would work. Like if you want to get a particular post, it has an ID, and then you get the user ID, you get some ID, and then you get title and body. And now we'll do this something similar in our, yeah. We'll do something similar in our code now, right? So let's create this function, get request. So guys, I'm just going to copy paste this function, and I'll create a separate. So I think I'm just going to close the demo file now. I think it was a good demo. And inside our, I think inside our Uber ride class, right? I'm just going to create a new function called get request. And I think just for the purposes of this exercise, I'll just create a main function over here so we can test this out. But we will delete this later. And we just want to run this API request. So it's a static function, so we don't have to create an object or anything. We can just call the API. We can just make the function call directly like that. I'm just gonna make. We should get errors actually. Yeah, we're getting errors because we are doing a whole bunch of stuff over here. Like we're using a buffered reader. We're using an input stream reader. We're using a whole bunch of things, right? And let's check this thing. I think they have. So you can see that we just need to do these imports over here. And if we do these imports, I think the error should go away. Right, and I'm just going to save that and do make again, compile it. And we're still getting an error. It says that main has already been defined. Oh, flip. How did it come so many times? What is happening, man? Asif.
I haven't done anything.
So it's not recognizing my get request. And why is that? Okay, it's because cannot find symbol my get request. That's because we deleted my get request function. So I'm just going to delete whatever is under there. And so we're saying that unreported exception, IO exception must be caught or declared to be thrown. So basically, because this method over here is throwing an IO exception, right? If we're implementing this function, right, we need some sort of way to catch the exception if an error occurs. So this, when we say throw IO exception, all it's doing is that it's going to make this API request, right? And if an error happens, it's going to throw an error. This exception just means error. It's going to throw an error. Now, when we're running it over here in our main method, we're just calling the function, right? But our main method doesn't know how to handle an error if it gets thrown, right? And that's why, like, that's the really cool thing about Java. You can literally control so much. Like, you can control how you handle errors to this extent. So to fix the issue, we'll just tell Java that, look, in the main method, just also throw the exception. Okay, if I do make, that should fix the issue, right? So you can see the error is no longer there. And now I'll just run the Uber ride class like that. And you can see that we are successfully getting the data. So our API call actually works and we are receiving the data. So like this thing actually works. Now we just need some sort of way to put our, whatever we did in our Postman over here, right? We need some sort of way to put this data in here. We need some sort of way to put it in here, right? So, I mean, let us just give this code a little bit of a read through so that we understand what's happening. So over here, we're using the URL class, right, to define a URL variable. And we're creating a new object called URL, right? And then we're using this, we're creating a readline string, setting it to null initially. And then we're creating an URL connection, right? And we are doing something called casting over here. So I think the connection object that is created, like when we do URL for getRequest.openConnection, I think it returns a type that is maybe like inherit, like it's somehow related to the HTTP URL connection. So if we do casting like this, right, type casting, we'll be able to convert it into the HTTP URL connection. Now it's important to do this casting, right? This is where polymorphism comes in. Because if you don't do this, you're going to get a type error. It's going to say that it doesn't recognize like HTTP URL, like this URL for getRequest.openConnection is not type HTTP URL connection. So because of that, we need to do something called casting. And you can only do casting with polymorphism objects. And polymorphism objects are basically like, in our example over here, we have person, driver, and passenger, right? Now, if we create an object of person, right, and we create a new driver, like person P is equal to new driver, that's actually going to work, right? But if we want to do some typecasting, right, we would have to specify like person P is equal to person and then new driver. So I mean, like basically, I think this will come up later as we're going through this and we can talk more about polymorphism. But what's happening over here is we're basically doing something called polymorphism. And we're using polymorphism to just set the type correctly so that we don't get type error, okay? Then we're just setting it as a GET request because remember, we're using a third-party API, so mostly we'll be using GET requests. And then like we're just setting a user ID over here. I don't think this is actually relevant for us, so I think I'll just get rid of that. And then we're going to set the response code. So we're going to get the response code. So when we send a request, right, we receive a response, right? And we're using this connection variable to get the response code. And anytime an API request is made, you'll always receive something called a status, right? And that status code can be OK. I think OK means 200. They're like numbers. I'm sure when you guys have gone to websites, sometimes you see an error 404, site not found, or something like that. Because 404 means that the site is not found. 200 means that it's working okay. 500 means that there's some sort of server error. So there's different codes like that. And like anytime you guys are stuck, you guys can probably just Google and find out more about those codes. And then over here, we're just doing response code. We're just checking if the response code is okay. So HTTP okay is 200. Then we're creating a buffered reader, right? And the buffered reader is basically creating a new input stream reader, right? And inside the input stream reader, we're getting the input stream. So I think what's basically happening is that we're just finding some sort of way to read the data that we're receiving, all right? And we're receiving the data over here. So this response is going to create a new string buffer. And then what we're doing here is we're just reading the lines, right? We're doing in.readLine, right? And then while you can read lines, it's running this for loop, and it's appending all the lines into our response. And then if we do response.toString, we get access to the string of the response. So I think that's how we're basically able to access the output over here like this, because we're accessing that string, right? So that's basically how we would like make the API request. Now let us actually try and convert this into something that will make sense for us, right? So let's see. I'm just going to use my Postman right now, and I'm just going to copy this, whatever we created, and I'm just going to add it over here directly. And I'm going to save it. Okay, I'm going to make it again, and I'm going to run it again. And great, we are actually receiving the data. Although it looks a bit distorted over here, we don't have to worry because we have already played around in our Postman over here, and we also created a demo file, so we sort of know how to access the data, right? Why is this happening, guys? Who's doing this? Cool. Awesome. Now, let us actually try to access the data. So now that's what we need to do. That's our next step. Like we have gotten the data successfully. So I think before I do that, guys, do you have any questions with what we've done so far? Please type in the chat. Yes, if it makes sense. No, if it doesn't make sense. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Guys, please respond in the chat if it makes sense. No, if it doesn't make sense. All right, so far, okay, great. Awesome, guys. So now we somehow got access to the response as a string, right? Now we just need some sort of way to access the data. Like we know that in Java, in JavaScript, right? It's accessing the data is as simple as doing this, like response.rows.elements, right? But we need some sort of way. But we need some sort of way to actually access the data using Java, right? And in Java, it's because it's a strongly typed language, type matters. Like the data type matters, okay? We need some sort of way to convert the response that we get into a JSON object so that we can access the attributes within it, all right? So this becomes a challenge. Like we need some sort of way to actually convert this string into a JSON object so we can perform something similar to this, where we're actually accessing the data, right? Cool. So the next thing is to, like, how do we convert string into a JSON object so we can access the data? That becomes the next question. So I don't have the answer to that. So let's figure that out. Probably put it on Google. How to convert.
Is everyone on board? Do they know what's happening? Or are they confused?
Yeah, I already asked. It's making sense. So basically, as if we were successfully able to retrieve the data and we're accessing it as a string right now, right? And the string buffer is basically of type string buffer, right? And we just, if we do response.toString, it converts the response to a string. But now we need some sort of way to convert this into a JSON object so that we can access the distance like we did in our demo file. So that's what we need to figure out now, right? And I have no answer to that. So let us Google it. I don't know who's making these changes, bro. I'm getting pissed off. Anyways, okay. How to convert a Java string to JSON object, right? So let's check that out. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. Let's see. So we can convert string to JSON using a JSON object. But let's see. So we're creating a JSON object here. Then we're creating a player object. And what is player again? I think this is what the player object looks like. And we're compiling it to the player class. And we're converting. So we would need to create some sort of class to retrieve the data. I'm sure there's got to be an easier way. Let's see. So I mean, like here, this is a very specific example, like it's dealing with this particular object, but what we're dealing with is so big and so nested. Let's see what else we can find. Let's see, I'm just trying to find some better documentation. So this is using something called assert functions. Assert functions are basically used in testing. Let me just say API requests here. Yeah, so this is what we're looking for. So we have a toString method. We can convert it into a JSON object. So guys, what we're basically doing here is just researching. Like that's one of the things that you'll find yourself doing a lot. So over here also they're doing some sort of API request using a string builder. Let's see what else we can find. So see, like this is kind of similar to the object that we would receive, something massive like this. We need some sort of way to parse that data so we can access the type that we're looking for. If you guys find something, please feel free to drop in the chat because we're trying to figure this out together. So over here, we're creating a JSON parser. Then we're using some casting over here, converting it into JSON object type. And then there's JSON array. Okay, let's see. So they've given us some steps nicely over here, which is interesting. I think a really great resource is like tutorials point, JSON string to JSON Java. So these are some examples over here of how we would do it. So we have an array over here that has like the JSON object, and then we're doing JSON array, converting the string into a JSON array, and then iterating through the JSON array, and then getting the JSON object as I, right? Yeah, I think this is something that we would use, right? Because we have access to an array over here, and then we're accessing the inner elements, right? And we're just doing object.getString, and we're changing it to a certain type. String to JSON object test is also doing something similar, but here we're just using object. There's no array. So I've observed that you need to use JSON array to actually convert a string that has an array and is in a JSON format. So we need a JSON array method and we need JSON object. So this is making sense. Let's see. Just trying to see this. All this is, yeah, I think decoding JSON. No, but we're just trying to convert string to JSON. Let's see what else we can find. So as you can see, guys, anytime you're working, like you need to be really patient and try and figure out exactly what will work for you. I don't think that this really helps us. Let's see. I think let's just go back. Let me just open a new tab. So I see that we could use JSON. So let us see what JSON is. Great. I think, let's see this. Cool, guys. So we would have to download something called JSON to be able to actually compile, to be able to run this, I think. So let's actually try this out, right? What I'll do is I'll just put this into a test file, all right? I'm just gonna call this new file test.java. Let me just quickly add that to my make file. Okay, I'm just gonna make, oh wait, inside my test file, I just wanna add whatever I got over here in here. Because I can see that we're using these new libraries over here. So let's see how we would have to deal with that. It looks like Google has built this JSON thing, so it seems reliable. Looks like we're getting an error. And the error is basically package.com.google.json does not exist, right? So we need some sort of way for our app to recognize this JSON stuff, right? So I think the best thing to do is to just research running a Java file using JSON. Because basically, guys, what you need to know is what we saw over here in this quick guide is that we need this JSON jar, right? And using JSON jar, we can actually create environment variables such that JSON will be recognized throughout your application. But I think that's a little bit complicated for what we're trying to achieve now. Like you guys should definitely try to do that on your own. But I think for the purposes of this, let us just try to run JSON directly in our program. All right. So we can see that this person over here is trying to use this JSON libraries. And we just need to use this to compile it. Right. So let us, this is where we need to download our JSON jar, right? So I think because we need the path to that JSON to actually compile the Java file. And then we need to run it, to run the file and then to compile the file. So I think.
Does this have to be, so you have to compile it with the path, with the class path?
Yeah, like either we could do that or we could add it as environment variables. But like if people want to follow along right now, environment variables does take some sort of time because I'm sure no one has ever created environment variables, right? So I think that is a bit of a learning curve. So what we'll do is we'll just use manually, like we'll add it to the path whenever we're compiling so that we can just access the JSON file, right? So I'm just going to do download JSON jar. And I'm just going to download this version. We have to download the jar file. I already have it here. What I'll do is I'll just get it from my downloads. So I think it's the 2.6.2, 2.8.6. Shouldn't make a difference. I think I'll just go with the 2.8.6 that I have here already in my downloads. And what I'll do is in here itself, inside here, I'll just create a new folder called JSON. And I'll just add the jar file inside the JSON, right? Then what I'll do is I'll come back here to my make and It's trying to compile my test.java, but it's giving me these errors because it's not recognizing the test.java. So what I'll do is so from what I understand over here, let me see this again. We need to include the path to this JSON file in our path, right? In our compilation path. So since we're using our makefile to do all the compilation, right? I think we can add it in the path over here, like similar to how we're supposed to be using JUnit, but we actually don't have JUnit in our directory over here. So I think what I'll do is I'll just replace this line over here with JSON. What is it called again? It's JSON 2.8.6 jar, right? I'm just going to change this to JSON 2.8.6.jar. I'm just going to add this to my compilation path, right? Because I know that we're actually using JUnit for our compilation over here in the class path. So similar to how we were doing this, setting the class path over here, we're using JUnit over here. So instead of JUnit, we could just use JSON. So I'm just changing, I'm not going to change the name of the variable. Like, I recommend you guys to actually create a new variable called JSON, but I'm not going to do that right now because I think we're running out of time. What I'll do is I'll just use JSON. I'll add it to my path right now. And if I try make, shouldn't give me an issue. We get an error. It says that class JSON tester is public, should be declared in a file named jsontester.java. Okay, so I think that's a very silly mistake. I'll just rename this JSON tester to test. Make it again. Great. So look, guys, we don't have any compilation errors because we added our JSON to our class path exactly as what we saw in Stack Overflow over here. So we're able to compile it. Now, if we want to run it, right? If we want to run it, we just need to use something similar. So inside my bin over here, I'm going to do Java, and then I'm going to do -cp, and I'm just going to do dot. So it's basically, I'm inside my bin directory. So I need to go up one directory into my JSON directory and access my JSON jar. And I'm just going to run my Java file, which is basically test. So it says could not find or load the main class test. So let's see what this issue is. So basically, the issue we're having is running a JSON file. I think looks like we've done the right thing. Let's see. For Java, you can set the class path option. Let's see. Oh, I don't think that's going to help. I'm just going to say running JSON, running Java, adding JSON class path. The CP that we saw over here actually stands for class path. And we're just saying that, look, Java, when you're compiling this class, just make sure you're also compiling using the jar file. That's all we're doing over here. So let's see. Something Stack Overflow should help us out here. Have we already looked at this?
Okay, what's the error? What's going on right now? I'm a bit confused.
So I'm basically just trying to run this Java file right now and getting some sort of error right now. So just Googling. Running Java file command, adding JSON to class path. Let's see. Let's see. So guys, this is what we're doing. We're just pretty much debugging right now. This should have running commands as well. Let me just say running Java file. Let's see. Okay. Okay, yeah, this is already happening in our make file. Like we're compiling it fine from what I see, but we're just not able to run it. Let's see. So it says cannot load main class Java, cannot load test. Oh, okay. I get it. Right, guys. So basically, the only one difference I did right now. So are you guys with me right now? Please drop a yes in the chat if you are, no if you're not. Hello? Okay, great, guys. Cool. So yeah, Lonwabo, this was a bit confusing for me as well, but I think I figured it out. Basically, what we're doing right now is we're just trying to convert our string that we got into a JSON object, and we have to use something called JSON for that. So what I'm trying to do right now is just to try and compile and run a JSON file, right? A file that has these JSON libraries. And if we want to access these JSON libraries, right, we need to use something called JSON tar, like jar file. We need to use a jar file for that, right? And I know this because when I was using JUnit, right, JUnit is a library for testing. We had to do something similar. We have to add it to the class path. So like if we want to compile a file that has this like Java doesn't know how to recognize this com.google.json. Java has no idea what this is, right? Because it's not in the Java package. This is like some third-party stuff, right? So we need to use this JSON thing, right? And add that into our class path so that when we're compiling it, we're like, okay, look, I'm compiling this file, but please just make sure that you run your JSON stuff on my compilation, right? And then once it successfully compiles, to run it as well, we need to just make sure that we're adding that into our path for running the file. So we're running the file knowing that there's some JSON stuff in it, okay? And because of that, because we're using this Google packages, we can do this. And like you guys can follow along and download the JSON library and do this right now on your computer. But another way of doing this is to actually set environment variables, right? And setting environment variables is a bit of a learning curve. This is something that you guys should definitely try, right? But what this is going to do is it's going to say that, okay, like every time you compile a Java file and like every time you do javac or Java, it's automatically going to run JSON as well. That's what this setting environment variables does, right? So we successfully ran the file, and like that's great stuff. Like we were able to actually run this file from having a JSON string like this and converting it into a JSON object that we can use, right? So this is good progress. I know that time is up and we still have quite a bit to go through. So Asif, do you have any suggestions on how to go about this now?
I think I think we go till 5 o'clock because we missed an hour in the morning. So 5 is fine.
I guess, guys, please drop a message in the chat if you should continue, if you're okay with that. Please type a yes if you are, please type a no if you're not. Yeah, guys, I know that bug was a bit intense, but we're pulling through this. We're about to actually make our API call and get our data in. Please type a yes in the chat if you want to continue. So I guess I'm going to continue, Asif?
Yeah, why is only Leonardo responding?
Jaden responded.
Okay, let's finish up. Let's go till 5 o'clock, and then we'll upload this, and then we'll ask them to just go through it tonight.
Great. Okay. Cool, man. Let's do this. So we're basically what we're doing is we're creating something called JSON builder over here, and I have a JSON string, right? So let us see. Let's see. How do we do this? Okay. What I'll do is inside our Uber ride class, right? We basically have a string over here. What I'll do is I'll create a new method over here. Okay. I'll say public void. I'm just gonna make it void for now. I'm gonna say convert string to JSON. I'm gonna say using JSON, right? That's a big function name, and I'm just gonna run. So what this will do is it's gonna take a JSON string, right? It's gonna take some sort of JSON string. I'll also just make this static, so we can just directly call it. And where's our test class? Our test class basically had our steps. So we'll do all this stuff, right? Let's see. So I'm just going to follow the steps over here. We're like using JSON. I'm also just going to import JSON into our Uber ride class. I'm just going to import everything in JSON. And in our method now, we're getting the string in. So we're taking the string in, and then we're transpiling it into this this class, this student class. But we don't really have a student class. So let's see. What we need to do is we need to convert this JSON string into something that's like more like a JSON object. Let's see. So we just need to Google a little bit, guys. So using, what is this? From JSON. Converting string to JSON.
You know, I honestly thought they would like, I don't know, I get what they're trying to do here, but I think this was a waste of time in the sense that we're not going to understand, or not that we don't understand, we might understand it, but we can't practice this stuff because we don't know how to use it right.
Sorry, Sanya, I didn't catch what you were saying. Can you please repeat that?
Behind me.
Hello? Hello?
So I think Simon's saying something.
Yeah, but I couldn't catch what she was saying. I think she dropped it in the chat. Cool, cool, cool. So guys, what we're trying to do right now is we just, like, it's such a simple thing we're trying to do. Like if we use something like Node.js for this, it's so quick, but like we're really just trying to access that kilometer value that we got up here. And we just need some sort of way to convert it into JSON so that we can access it. And that's what we're struggling with really. So what we have to do is we just need to convert this into JSON object. I think I saw it somewhere here. So we're deserializing the JSON to an object over here. I just want to convert deserialize JSON to JSON object. So I think instead of using this user class, we can use something called a JSON object class. So let's see that JSON JSON object. It should be the same thing. This is actually the Java documentation, which is not great actually. I feel like we've seen this already. Okay, I think instead of using the student class, we need to use something called a JSON object class, right? And that information should be here. Oh, wait, I saw something. There we go. So we have this JSON parser, and then we have a JSON element, and then we have a root object. I feel like all this is so unnecessarily complicated. Okay, let's just try JSON object. I'm just going to call this JSON object. Is going to be JSON from JSON. I'm going to take the JSON string, and then instead of using JSON object, instead of using student, we just transpile it using the JSON object class. and let us see what we actually get from this. Cool. So I'm just going to comment this out. And I'm just going to pass this function in over here. So it's called a convert to string, and I'm going to take the response.toString. I'm going to run that. Okay, no error. And I want to run the Uber ride file. So, I mean, we are getting, okay, I think we have this JSON string result up there. And yeah, we are getting the object over here. And what we need to do is we need some sort of way to get. So like, guys, I think this is great news because now we do have access to the JSON object over here, right? We have access to the JSON object, but we need some sort of way to still, like, there's a difference, right? So over here, we had access to the response as a string. And then once we've passed it through our function over here, using this JSON builder stuff over here, instead of using this student file, I just used the JSON object, right? And now I'm just going to, I just printed the JSON object and we have access to the JSON object. So if I do JSON object dot, I think we just need some sort of way to, I think we saw something, it said it had something to do with the get JSON as array or something like that. Where was that? So let's see if we are able to recognize get as, I think it was JSON array. And we just have to do, inside that, we just want to access, let's just check out our demo file again. We just have to access rows because remember our rows over here is actually an array. So we need to use this get JSON as an array, get as JSON array to access that array. Now if I do that, let's see what we get. Oh, I need to make the file. And I need to run it again. Let me just clear my terminal. So I'm just going to comment that out for now. And we are getting, are we getting the rows?
Yep, there it is. Elements, distance, text.
Cool. So we're basically getting JSON as an array, right? And now we need some sort of way to iterate over this, right? Let's see. I must say that the Java documentation is, like, for just doing an API call is almost non-existent, huh?
So they usually use Java Spring for this stuff, but
really,
yeah. But I think to be honest, it's not a learning curve. Let's just continue what we're doing for now.
Cool. So wait, is Java Spring like a UI thing or what?
I don't know, but it's something to do with REST API. That's what I know. I read about it. It's something to do with REST APIs.
So look, we're getting JSON as an array, right? And then the next thing we need to do is we need to get JSON as an object, right? So let's see, JSON object. And then once we get it back as an object, we just need to get a value. We just need to get, I think it was elements. Oh, no. I think it was elements array again. So inside, just want to clarify. So inside rows, we get elements. We get elements as an array again, right? So, whew, this is a lot, guys. Get JSON as an array and elements, and then let's just see what we get with that. So I'm just going to put all of this inside system.out. Errors. Okay. And we're getting errors. Okay. So it's did work to some extent. It said it's not as a JSON object. So let's break this down further. I mean, we were successfully getting the rows. So let's just take it from there. Oh, why? Okay, because I haven't commented that out. Let me just try that again. Okay, cool. So we are getting the rows. We just need to access the elements, and let us see this get as JSON array. Where's the documentation? So we got it as an array, right? Oh, I think what we need to do is we need to iterate through the array, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just Google that, iterate through JSON array. What is this? JSON object. JSON array object. Java. So this is, if we just have the object, we can just use JSON object.get. Right now we have an array. And we have to use an iterator like this. Let's try that. So right now we have our JSON array over here. I think let us actually initialize JSON array, but okay. So we have the JSON array that is required for this. So I think we need to create a JSON array object. I'm just gonna go JSON array is equal to okay. And let's see if this works. So I'm just gonna use the iterator to iterate through this JSON array, and let's see what it prints out over here. Okay, semicolon. Iterator, where are we? We're not, cannot find symbol. We need to import. Okay, I'm just gonna import java.util.star. It still cannot be converted. JSON element cannot be converted into string. Okay, so it turns out that each element inside this iterator is actually a JSON element. So it's a JSON element. So let's see. Yeah, it looks like it compiled. I'm gonna run it now. And do we have access to it? Yeah, I think we do. So if I do, let me create a JSON element, JSON element, JSON element, oh, JE, I'm just gonna set that to null. But inside here, I'll just set JE to iterator.next. So the next iterator.next would be our JSON element would be the next element. Okay, and then I am going to, before I make it, I want to just do system.out.println, and I want to try je.get, right? I think it's just get, if I'm not mistaken, because right now we're just trying to get, oh, we need to convert it into JSON object. So I think we need to get as JSON object. So get as JSON object. So guys, there's like a whole bunch of type changing that's happening here, which is creating a whole bunch of confusion. And once we convert it as a JSON object, I just want to get elements. Oh wait, but elements is an array. So I think what we need to do is we need to get as a JSON array. I hope this works. This is really deep. No compilation errors, good sign. And we got access to the array. Okay, this is good. This is good. So now we have access to the array. Let me store it. Let me just store it as a JSON array over here. So I'll just overwrite my JSON array variable. And I will just create another iterator under over here so that I can access that. So I'm just creating a new iterator over here using the JSON array that we've updated. So we updated the JSON array, which has elements now. So basically we got to elements. Now we just need to access distance. So what we need to do is we need to access this array, and we just need to access that element. So I think it's just the first element. It only has one element, right? So I think that's good. We can just do iterator.hasNext, and we can do je.get as JSON object. Yeah, but now we're no longer getting a JSON array. We are just getting distance. So I'm just going to say get distance, and this is no longer a JSON array. I'm just going to system.out.println. Guys, please bear with me. Like, if you're following along, like you're doing a great job. If not, don't worry. I'll just I'll explain everything to you guys. It is a bit complicated, but yes, we have access to the distance finally. And then I think if I just do .get again, I mean, now I have this is basically a JSON object, right? So the JSON object is equal to, so guys, as you can see, I'm just reusing the variables I'm just rewriting the variables with the updated JSON object. And then I'm just going to do system.out.println, and I'm just going to do JSON object dot get text. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we got an error. That's because incompatible types, JSON element cannot be converted to JSON object. So it looks like this get as JSON object, the moment we do get over here, it's just getting it as a JSON element. So I think we should probably just convert it back to get as JSON object. So it converts it to a JSON object for us. And then if I run that again, bam, we have access to our text. Oh my gosh, that was so complicated just to get access to our text. Like, look at how quickly we did it over here. And I think in Java, there's got to be a simpler way, guys, of doing this. Like, I'm pretty sure. There's definitely got to be a simpler way. But turns out that we did convert our JSON string into a JSON object. And then using the get JSON as array to get the array. And then we use get JSON as object to convert it into an object. Yeah.
I think you want to give everyone a break for like 5 minutes before we start going through this again, and then we end the day off.
Yeah, sure, man. Like I'm pretty exhausted from that. That was quite intense. I'm just gonna pause the recording.